If you need to rebuild the magneto on your tractor, then this is the video for you. Today I'm working on an Allis Chalmers WD with a Fairbanks Morse FM-J magneto, which is often found on Allis Chalmers B, C, CA, WC, WD, and WD-45 tractors. I will show you all of the steps in the rebuild process, and at the end of the video, you'll have the confidence to make this repair on your own tractor. My tractor will not start because it has no spark. Whether your tractor has no spark or it has weak spark and you determine that you want to rebuild the magneto, then you can follow along. You need to take the magneto off of the tractor. There's two bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, and then you can pull your wires off, and then we're ready to start rebuilding that magneto. I'm taking both of the screws out the end of the cap here. That'll expose the cap, and then we'll be able to see the rotor inside of here. The rotor will come out. Mine pulled off very easily. Sometimes you'll have to use screwdrivers to pry that rotor out. You might break it in the meantime, but you can get a new rotor, so it's not a big deal. Then you have 4 screws here. I already have 2 of them out. So we'll take those screws out. They do have a small washer behind them. And then we'll be able to get this next cap off. Oops, I thought I had all the threads screwed out on that screw, and I didn't. Okay, here we go. Here's our gasket came off. Set this aside. Inside here, I'm going to pull out this cork that's at the bottom here. You can just use a screwdriver or a pick or something to get that old cork out of there. And again, you're going to break it, but that's okay. We'll replace it with a new felt when we put this back together. A little bit more, and then we'll come the rest of the way, like so. Next, you'll remove this washer that's underneath that cork, and then you can take your gear out. My gear will snap out. There is a small ring here at the bottom that you can pry out. Sometimes it'll be stuck really hard, but you have to pry that ring out in order to remove the gear from the cap. Now, when I took my gear out, you can see that the bushing came with it, and there's no longer a bushing inside of the cap. If that happens for you, you have 2 options. One would be to replace only the bushing. The other option is to replace the whole entire cap. When you buy the new cap, it comes with the bushing already installed. That's probably the easier route to go, but if you are on a budget, then you could replace only the bushing. And of course, if your gear is damaged, you can replace that as well. It's important to remove this small clip that's at the top of your gear here, and it is spring-loaded, and you do need to reuse it, so don't pry it off of there and let it go flying in your shop. Next, you can take your points and your condenser out. There's a few screws that hold them in. We'll start with this big one here that's on the bottom of the points. Move that aside. Next, we can remove the condenser like that. Move that screw out of the way. Then you can see there's one more screw here on the edge that holds those wires in place. And oops, got that out. And then we got the points will come out. Let me take this last screw out here that's down by the spacer, the felt spacer there. And then there we go. Okay. Next, I'm going to take this gear off, and sometimes it's really stuck. It looks like it's keyed in there, so I'm going to get a puller, and we'll show you how to take that gear off. I used a gear puller to pull this gear off of my magneto. These are really fragile, especially at the point here where it's marked out for the key, so be careful when you pull your gears off. I want to point out the timing marks that are on the gears. This gear has a dot for the timing mark. This one's slightly different where it has a bevel. Look for either of those timing marks, and you'll reference those when we put the magneto back together. Next, you can take out these 4 screws here, which will remove the plate that the points go on. These screws will be kind of tight, and you can take all 4 of those off. Actually, we probably should have pulled this off first. Then we can take the 4 screws out. This screw right here will stay in the magneto. We only need to take the 4 out on the corners. Sometimes the plate will be really stuck on there, so you'll have to pry it out. You can use a large screwdriver once you get all your screws out in order to pop that plate off. I saw my plate move, so I'm hopeful that it's kind of loose. Just pry underneath there. Nope, it's not loose. Let's pry from the other side. Here we go. Okay, and then your plate will just pull off like so. I'm pounding down both of the tabs on my lock washer on either side, which will enable us to take that bolt off. I'm going to put a crescent wrench on the side here to hold that in place while I use the impact. There we go. You see that there's that washer underneath there. We'll set both of those aside, and then I'm just going to take 2 screwdrivers underneath here. Oops, looks like I only needed 1 to pry that off, and then we'll see the impulse spring underneath there. Looks like it's stuck on. Let me try to pry that off. There you go. You can use 2 big screwdrivers to get underneath, and then this plate will come off. You can see that the weights are down underneath there. Next, we have a key, which will come out like so. Then we have a few covers underneath here. Again, these will be really stuck in there, and you can pry those out with screwdrivers as you go. Get this plate off. Then we have another plate here. You can see that there's a flat side here, which will enable you to drive that entire plate off, but you got to get a screwdriver in there where the flat side is. Underneath here is a rubber. This, you're going to get a new rubber in your kit, so it doesn't matter if you damage it prying that out of there. Get it underneath it, and then the rubber will come out. We have 1 more plate underneath there. Again, you can drive that out like so, and then we're bound to the bottom. There's a small clip down at the bottom which you'll need to remove and get out. Once you have that out, you can use a press to drive the armature out. Don't use a hammer. If you do, you'll probably break the aluminum housing. My armature is pressed out, as you can see. Next, I want to talk to you about the bearing that's inside of here. Most of the time, your bearing will be fine. You can just repack it and use your bearing, as it is a little bit difficult to get it out and replace it. However, if you decide that your bearing does need to be replaced, it is possible. You would, again in the press, drive your bearing out. First, there's a snap washer or snap ring underneath there that you need to remove. Then your bearing will come out in the press. You replace it first with a piece of insulating paper like this. This is specific for this Magneto. Once you have the paper in there, then it will go around like this, and then you can drive your new bearing in there, again gently with the press. This is rather difficult to do, and it's likely that you might damage your paper. So if you are going to tackle replacing this bearing, consider buying more than 1 insulating paper, just so if you damage one, you have another try. So that's what you need to know about the bearing. Like I said, we're going to stick with the bearing that we have here. I'll just repack it and we'll be ready to go again. I have 2 set screws at the top of the Magneto here. You can take both of those out, and then you'll be able to remove the coil. I'm working on a different Magneto now. This is the one we were working on before, and you can see that I could not get that other set screw out. I heated it up, and it will not come out. I'm probably going to have to drill it out if I want to get that out. So I'm going to show you on this one instead. Normally those screws will come out easier. There may be times when you need to use heat, but they are pretty tight in there. Once you have both of those screws removed, your coil will come out. This is an older style coil, and lots of times these will get too hot and they'll melt down in there, kind of look like tar and kind of be messy. The newer style coils, like this one that's more molded, is a lot better. It's a more modern design. You can see on this old coil that the contact is broken off at the top. It's in pretty bad shape, definitely needs to be replaced. When you are ready to reassemble your Magneto, you're going to need some new parts. You probably won't need all of the parts that I have laid out here on the table, but I want to show you what's available so that you can make an informed selection of parts. We have brand new points and condenser. That would probably be a good purchase for you. This is a new bearing with the paper. That's optional if you want to replace that or not. Here is a brand new gear. These break a lot. This is a new rotor. That's a really affordable new part to purchase. Back here for the impulse, you're going to have a couple different options for how you want to repair your impulse if it needs replacement. One option is to purchase the whole entire impulse ready to go on. This is a really simple and easy way to go. It's slick because the spring is already loaded up in there for you. So that's one option. Another option is to buy the spring independently. You could buy the weights independently, or these dogs, I guess I should call them. The dogs, the brand new ones, can only go on a new style impulse. So if you're using an existing old style impulse and want to put new weights on, these weights won't go on. Another option is that you can purchase just the dogs on the plate, and they'd be without the spring. So you can choose what you want. When you purchase the new dogs, it does come with the bolt and the washer, or the nut and the washer that you're going to need for that. Let's move on and talk about the coil here. This is a brand new upgraded style coil that's more molded, and it comes with the contact here, which you'll put on. Here we have new gaskets. This is the gasket that goes in between the governor housing and the magneto. That gasket is purchased separately from the gasket set that you buy all together here. These gaskets all go inside the magneto. That's probably a for sure purchase. If you're going to go at your magneto, you definitely need to buy those. We do offer spark plugs for the WD, so if you want to replace your spark plugs, that's a good idea. Here is the new cap. This cap comes with the bushing already installed, or we do offer the bushing separately, depending on which way you want to go with that repair. And lastly, we have the Magneto distributor cap that comes with the spring and the carbon, but the brass threaded rod is a separate purchase. So when you're ready to make those purchases, you can go to farmtractorrepair.com and buy those parts there. Your purchase on that site helps to fund future tractor tutorials. I have my armature pressed into the magneto, and you'll want to do the same. Now I'm ready to put these pieces that hold the armature in, or at the top of the armature, back into the magneto. This clip slides into the bottom, and this is something that you will reuse from when you took it apart. You can see that my clip's down there in the bottom. Next I have this washer, which will slide in. That's new in your kit. Then you have this rubber seal. It is directional. The smooth side goes towards the top like that. And make sure you just slide all the way around there and make sure that you get it all the way inserted so that it's flush with the groove that's in there. Lastly, we have this washer that has the flat side to it, or the curved side, I should say. I'm going to set that in there, and then I'm just going to use this deep well socket as a driver to drive that in like so. Drive it a little bit more. Then you just want to make sure that it's flush. I'm happy with that side, but I want to drive it just a little bit more up there. There we go. That looks good to me. And then lastly, we have this cover that goes on the top, which I'll set in there. Before you put this all together, you want to make sure that your magneto is nice and clean so that it will go back together nicely for you. I'm ready to reinstall my impulse here. I have an impulse spring inside of the cap. This is a brand new impulse spring, and if this tab is broken off at the end, you will need to replace your impulse spring. So you could pop out your old impulse spring and drive your new one in. I have my impulse spring in here ready to go. This is my new weight assembly, which comes all assembled like this, ready to go in. You can see that there are 2 slots on here. The longer slot will drop into the tab that's on your impulse spring. So you can set that in there like so and drop it all the way down. Oops, for some reason mine's stuck on something. Let's see. Okay, so we got it dropped down in there. Next, you need to wind this around twice. So I'm going to pick this up. I got to make sure that the spring comes with me while I turn it one turn, and then I'm going to go another turn so that there's enough impulse. So once you get here, it's pretty tight. Let me wind this around. I'm stuck on that ear. And then we go, oops, I just lost it. You pick that up again and drop that down. I'm where I want to be, but I can't get it down all the way. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so that will be ready now. I'm going to take it out of the vise and I'll put it onto the magneto. Now this is my old style cap. You can see that it's slightly different than my new style cap. Let me pull that out of there so you can see it. It is different right here where the weights are held in. Some people will want to replace only the weights and not this whole entire cap. If you decide that you want to replace only the weights, you have to make sure that at some point your cap was upgraded to the new style. The new weights will not go on the old style cap, okay? So if you want to replace the weights, got to make sure you got a new style plate, or you can just buy the whole entire plate with the weights already on it and put it on there, and then your impulse will be ready to go onto the magneto. Next, I'll drop my half moon key in, and we're reusing that same half moon key. Then my impulse assembly is ready to go in. Notice there's the groove for the key, and I'll just kind of line that up and drop it in there. Next, I have a new washer and nut for the top. That came with the purchase of the impulse assembly that has the weights on it. I'm going to tighten this up, and then I can just tighten this the rest of the way with a socket until it's tight. Before you put the coil into the magneto, I would recommend that you put the contact on the top. There's a screw with a washer and the contact that comes with the coil when you purchase it. So I'm going to line that all up like so and drop it down in there. I'm going to use a little screwdriver here to tighten that up and tighten it up all the way. And then I'm going to bend the contact back over at about the halfway mark and bend it down like that so it's ready. Next, I'm going to drop the coil into the magneto. If you notice this tab right here, that goes up. And you can read the writing on the magneto to know which way is up or know which way is up on the magneto because you paid attention to how you took it off. The coil will drop down in like that. You got your wires. Make sure this wire is loose and free, that you didn't drop the coil over top of that magneto. Next, you have your 2 set screws, which you can put in the top here. And then I'll put the plate on here with the 4 screws. I have my new condenser and points in the magneto. I want to talk to you about what I've done. Your new condenser comes with this loop off of the condenser, so you'll need to slide it on, and then you can take a pair of pliers and tighten that up, put your new screw through, and then put your condenser onto the magneto. It's really important that this screw is tight. That's the ground for the magneto, so if it's loose, you're going to have problems. So get that screw really tight. Over here, my points just drop down like you can see here. I also have my lubricated felt screwed into place there. My wires are all tucked around back here and screwed into the end of the points here. I got the wire from the condenser, the wire from the coil, and the wire on this side is all tucked in there. Once I have the screw through here and the wires are held into place, then I tuck the wires just down in here. You can see how I kind of have mine tucked, and you can do the same so that they're out of the way when we go to put the lid on to the magneto. Next, I want to show you how to set the points. I recommend anywhere from 12 to 15 thousandths, and right now my gap is too small. So let me widen that gap up a little bit with the screwdriver here. That might have been too much, but let's put the gauge in there. You want your gauge to be snug. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of an adjustment. You want that snug fit in there like so. I like that. So now I'm going to tighten those points up just like that. It's always good to double check and make sure that that didn't move on you while you were tightening it. It didn't. So again, that's 12 to 15 thousandths on the gap on your points, and then you'll be all set. I'm ready to put my new gear on. Notice that it does have that tab which has to line up on the shaft of the armature there. So I'm going to make sure that that's lined up. It's super important that you get that lined up. Once you are certain that it's lined up, you can use a little socket like this to drive it down into place. I think I got to go just a little bit further. That looks good. And then you reuse that tab from before. I have my new gear in the cap right here. You can see that I inserted the gear from this direction, and then on the top I reused that existing washer and clip to drop down in there. Once I had the clip around the shaft, I used a socket like this one to drive it all the way down to the bottom. You'll want to do the same. Next, you can put your new felt down in there. I'm just going to tap it with a screwdriver, make sure it's all the way to the bottom, and then I'm ready to put my new rotor on. Notice that there is a flat side on the rotor which lines up with the flat side on the shaft, and it snaps all the way down in there like so. Next, we got to line up the timing marks on both of these gears here. So I have a new washer in place, and then I can move my gear so that the dot or the bevel, whatever your timing mark is, remember we talked about that earlier, is towards the top. I can see that my dot is right there. Then in the cap, I want to put the C, because we have a clockwise rotation, down towards the bottom, and then they will line up. This is absolutely crucial that you get those marks lined up how they should be for the timing. So you're looking in there and testing to make sure that your C is lined up with your dot. Mine is. I've got my gasket in place. It's all lined up like that. And then I'm just going to put these 4 screws around there to tighten it up. I'm ready to assemble my distributor magneto cap. I have a spring with a piece of carbon on the end that goes into the center here. You can push that in and kind of slide while you push it in, and then once you have it in the center, it should go up and down like mine does. Next, we have this brass rod. It's threaded on the end and it will just screw in. I did have to cut my rod a little bit shorter, and you might need to do the same. When you assemble this cap onto the magneto, you want to make sure that it goes down all the way and that it's flush, and if yours isn't, you'll need to use a grinder and make your rod a little bit shorter if that happens on yours. I got my new gasket on, and then I'm ready to drop it down in here like that. Notice that my cap attaches nicely. There's no gap there. Yours should do the same. Next, I have 2 screws on either side, which I'll tighten up. I have my magneto back on the tractor and it's timed properly. Let me tell you how you should time your magneto. The first thing you need to do is take the inspection cover off of the bottom so that you can see the flywheel. Then use your hand crank to rotate that flywheel around until you see the F, which is for fire. You know that you're in the right position for the timing of your tractor. Then you can put your magneto onto the tractor. You'll notice that the slots in the gear of the magneto will line up with the slots that are here inside the governor housing. And your magneto will slide on with that new gasket in place. Then you can put your wires in the proper order. This firing order is on here, 1, 2, 4, 3, but that might vary model to model. So make sure you consult with your manual to be sure that your firing order is correct. It's a good idea to put new spark plugs in. I've done that. I got 4 new spark plugs here. The tractor runs nice and it's a good fix. When you have your magneto running, or your whole entire tractor running, you can move your magneto forward and back to make slight timing adjustments if it's laboring too hard or anything like that. You just move it back and forth like this, and once you have it in the position that you want, then you tighten up both your bolts there and you'll be all set. I hope that this tutorial is helpful to you when you need to rebuild your Fairbanks Morse magneto. If you want to watch more videos from us, go ahead and subscribe to our channel.